we're going to make an intuitive sculpture using slabs. So something similar to what you see here. When making art, you don't always have to have a plan in mind ahead of time as to how something is going to look. One of the things that's kind of unique and also just an artistic practice is using the material, letting your creativity flow while you're making something, and make the decisions at that moment as to where something should go. When you're starting to work with your clay, you might be having clay that's right out of the pug mill, which is in round logs. Or you might have some that's more flat already in some sections. In either case, you're going to want to take that clay and flatten it out to be much thinner than what it is to begin with. So, taking a thick piece of clay like this and starting to throw it down on the table, we're able to stretch the clay out, especially if we start throwing this at an angle rather than just straight down. We can stretch the clay out and begin to flatten it before we even start working with the rolling pin. We're going to slice off a little bit of the clay so that we can use the sticks and the rolling pin on either side and have the rolling pin actually touch these slats that are on either side of the clay. So I'm going to take a little bit of this clay off. Just going to build it right onto the slab that I'm making here. Same on this side, it's a little bit thin, so just take it, add it on. Then I'm going to put these sticks on either side, and you'll want to do this while you're standing so that we actually have a little bit of pressure that you can push in on the clay with. Actually push your body weight into the clay so that way you can start to flatten it. After you start with this, you want to flip it around, move it around a little bit on the board so that way it doesn't stick. One thing you might want to do at this point is just grab some newspaper and put it underneath. Just grab a chunk. Don't just have it be a single sheet. Have a couple sheets. Put that right underneath your slab so that as you do some finishing rolls on here with the rolling pin, you'll really get that slab thin and it won't stick. After I've made my slab, I'm going to choose a texture that I'm going to be pressing in. So there's a variety of texture mats in the front of the room. I'm going to pick one that I think would be fun to work with, and I'm going to use that to press in texture on this slab. So I first put the mat down, then very slowly I imprint in that texture with the rolling pin. I'll move this mat down just a little bit, try to line it up so that it matches with my previous texture. Roll it and press it in. Move on down to the next part here. I'll roll it and press it in. Last little bit of texture on this part. All right, so this slab that I just made needs to dry out a little bit before I can work with it. So I'm going to be putting this in front of a fan in the back of the room, and we'll let that dry out just a little bit while we start kind of getting our next thing made. So you can make a couple slabs to work with. It doesn't have to be just a single slab. And we'll move on to the next stage here once it's a little more dry. All right, now I've got a slab that's more leather hard. If I pull the slab up just a little bit, it's not really floppy. It can actually hold some shape. I know that it's not too wet, but also it's not so dry that I wouldn't be able to attach it anymore. It still feels very cool. It has a lot of moisture left in it. So this is an intuitive sculpture, which means that you're going to let the your ideas flow about what you're going to make based on what you think looks interesting in that moment. So it does have to be sculptural, it does have to be 3D, but you can put the pieces together in any which way that you'd like. So some of you may find it nice just to flip that project or that slab right over. That way you're not thinking about the texture and you're just going to start making shapes. You can find things that are circular or things that have lines to them within the room, and you can begin to cut out your slabs. If you do have the clay a little more wet, it can be nice because then you can use your chunks and bend them as well. From there, you're going to decide how you want to put things together. Score slip seal is very important. So as you're deciding where you want to attach things and how you want to attach them, every point of contact needs to have that score slip seal effect completed. Otherwise, the slabs won't hold together. So here's an intuitive slab sculpture that I've already started to make. I had the clay a little bit more wet as I was going, so I was able to bend some of my slabs, which is why you'll see these curves on the sculpture. So let's add some of these pieces that I just cut out right onto this sculpture that I've already started to make. You'll need some slip. You'll need a tool that you can use for making score marks. I suggest a fork. And you'll need to just let your creativity flow as to where you think something that you could add on might be nice. So as I'm looking at this form, I want to add a little more complexity over on this side. Right? If I view it from the front angle where I began, I like that kind of shape the way that it is over there. But definitely I need to work on making this more complex kind of throughout and maybe even build out from this central form. So I'm going to take this little chunk here that I cut off and I want to have it go from right here up to this area here. One of the things you'll find helpful, rather than just connecting it on a single little spot, is to actually make a little edge that it can connect into. So I'm taking my fettling knife and I'm cutting a little ledge, little divot, where that shape is going to be able to sit. I'm going to do the same where it's going to attach. I'm just creating a little more surface area where my shape can sit. Anywhere that you can, try to take some chunks of clay and add them in as a little bit of support. So it might be hidden behind the shape that you just added on, but anything that you can add some strength into your project with. So I'm just taking a little bit of clay and I put it in as like a little pinch here, right behind the shape that I just added on. Using your hand or a wooden modeling tool, you can then blend that clay in to make it a little bit stronger. Especially the larger the project gets, the more you're going to want to have these connection points secure. So from there, you grab your next piece and you decide where you should put it. From here, you just start making some decisions. Look at your sculpture from multiple angles. Decide what you think is interesting, what do you think could be more interesting. Don't be afraid to take pieces out of your project. Cut through your project to make it see-through in some way. This is a part that you definitely need to be very careful with, and you might consider using one of the sharper blades that I can check out to you to use. But maybe I want to actually see through this area here to something behind. Well, I can use one of the sharper knives and I can cut through the shape to make a negative space. I'm going to try to repeat a curve and kind of a sharper edged shape, kind of like a fin here, or a crescent. I'll take that piece out. Maybe I use that piece somewhere else. As long as I keep the clay wet enough, I can easily reuse it in another area. well. But that is the intuitive sculpture. Okay? You'll find it very intuitive the way that you build it, because you're just going off of your creativity and letting that creativity flow as you're working on it. It may look like something, or it may look like something very abstract, but you're just pushing the sculptural form of what you make.